This is Dennis Ramundi with the Coffee League, found at thecoffeeleague.com, discussing everything related to coffee. And today I have a very interesting guest. His name is Charles Studor. He's got a background in engineering, but also spent time in Honduras and knows a lot about coffee. And one of the things I haven't discussed is how artificial intelligence, robotics, new developments in technology might and be applied to coffee, especially what we consider to be specialty coffee. And so we're going to discuss that today. His company, Briggo, which he founded in, I believe, 2008. And they're out there. I think we were discussing this before the interview today. And Charles, this company, Briggo, should be thought of as a coffee company, not an equipment company or a machine company. Welcome to the show. And am I right in what I said there?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great, my pleasure. So tell me, how did you enter the world of coffee? Because you have a degree in electrical engineering, I believe, also an extensive background in computer science. You've done nonprofit work, but what exactly is it that directed you toward coffee?
Well, I think it's, I love to cook, and coffee was one thing. I would make for big parties and cook really nice meals, but I'd always have a hard time with coffee at the end of the meal. It never was quite right. And I didn't really appreciate how precisely you have to work with that coffee in order to get a really good cup out. And, it's kind of an engineering problem, if you will. It's a pretty complex process, and it kind of intrigued me that I couldn't do it. So how do I approach coffee from an engineering point of view? And that's kind of one of the starting points of the company.
But now, when you were in Honduras, you spent time there.
Mm-hmm.
Were you involved with any aspect of coffee in Central America when you were there?
Well, it's interesting. Where I was not necessarily a deep coffee region. It was in the central part of Honduras, Olancho. Nobody goes there. But the people would make their coffee locally very precisely in these socks. And
right.
it kind of made, I was really curious about why they did that and how precise they were in that particular process, because they took, actually, for what's available for them locally is not particularly good coffee. They actually, through a very precise process, made it as good as it could be, and it was actually pretty good.
Ted, tell us about that process, about how they use the sock. A lot of our listeners might not have heard of this before.
Yeah, well, so since I like to cook in the morning in a little teeny, I won't call it a hotel, but in a little place that I was staying, I would go and help the people make breakfast, and I would watch them, and it's literally a cotton. You could think of it like a sock, about 6 inches tall, and held by a little metal ring that's maybe 3 inches in diameter. And they would very precisely boil the water, wait for it to come off boiling to what turned out to be about 200 degrees, and then they would take cups and pour it through and watch the extraction come out. And as soon as it was no longer jet black, they would throw the coffee away and pull it away from the pot and be done with it. And it really struck me that they were so carefully watching the colors, and that they were willing to throw away what at the time I thought was perfectly good coffee. Why don't you make more, right? And it was because they understood that early part of the extraction was the best part, and they were not willing to put that more bitter part that came later out. I didn't articulate this in words. I was just watching it, and it just struck me how much effort they put into that. And then when I'd come back to the U.S. and I'd go to a typical coffee shop and people weren't even paying attention, I thought, wow, that's interesting. We have a much better starting point, but down there they were just much more intent on that precise process.
And when
in a lot of cases we are.
When you were down there, I mean, in addition to watching how they did it, and it sounds like you were watching it through the eye of a scientist who was looking at understanding the precision involved. Were you also consuming? Are you a person that likes drinking coffee yourself? Yeah.
Oh yes. And so and just the environment there that sometimes it's the coffee, sometimes it's the environment you're in, but together, it was a good experience, right? And knowing that torrefactor coffee that they were using was really not a great starting point, right?
Mm-hmm. And then, okay, so you have that experience down there. Then tell us your journey from there to Briggo.
So we were doing nonprofit work down there. It was similar to like Habitat for Humanity for a small colonia. And I would come back to the U.S. and I would kind of experience this cultural shock, right, between the West and what's happening in that area. And although we were doing a lot of work, we were doing a lot of capital improvements. The first sewer treatment plant in the whole state, a lot of water projects, school, and things like that. What the people really wanted was an opportunity to take care of themselves, provide for their family. But there were very few opportunities for these people in that region. And so I was kind of struck going back and forth that it was the typical American go down and, put in infrastructure when people really just want an opportunity. So I was trying to figure out how I could create opportunity. How could I create a business in kind of the next phase of my life? How could I create a business that is organic? Part of it is creating opportunities for people back at origin. And the only way I could figure was if I could take some of the cost out of what we do at this end of that supply chain and turn around and buy direct and buy ethically high quality ingredients, I could create more opportunities all the way along the way. And it happened to be in 2008, robotics are becoming more available, more readily accessible. More people were getting into that. The iPhone was just coming out. Redbox was taking over Blockbuster. And it was just kind of this obvious thing that, wow, it's kind of crazy the way we manufacture specialty coffee in a lot of the shops out there, because it's hard to be precise. And that precision that I was seeing that these women were doing with the coffee they had, we were not applying. So what if I could make it more precise, but take out some of the cost associated with creating that specialty product, and then turn around and do the right thing with the origin, essentially. And that's the thing, and that could be the thing that actually grows the company, because people would find that an attractive thing to be engaged with.
All right, so you had this idea. I'm following. So you have this idea to use robotics, artificial intelligence, whatever is out there, or whatever technologies are out there to, and there were, there's always been coffee machines that usually produce low quality coffee that people in their desperate moments go to. And maybe some people enjoy them, and probably quality varies. So you're thinking, how can we, in a very consistent way, produce quality coffee through robotics or machinery? And then where do you go from there? Do you sell this idea on an investor? Do you actually do the technical designs yourself, or where do you go from there?
Well,
that idea.
Where do you go from there? Well, I started to study the process, and at that time, the best shop in town, coffee shop, was Cafe Medici, and Patrick Pierce was the guy that ran that, but he was also a champion barista himself, and he judged championships. And I started to engage with him, and I actually ended up paying him to work on the side to help teach me exactly what does he do and what does he focus on as a process around extracting espresso and stretching milk, foaming it, and what's important and what's not. And I spent a bit of money and time, about a year, working with him and working through that process of understanding, is this coffee, specialty coffee, something that could be improved in quality and efficiency and being less wasteful, essentially. And he really, at first I thought, barista's not going to want to help me make a robot that's going to take barista jobs, if you would, right? But his thought was, and I totally buy into this, is that if we can get high quality coffee out to a broader market, there'll be more and more demand for specialty coffee, and there'll be more people that'll go to high-end baristas.
Right. Let me interrupt you there, because this is an important point. I would agree with you on that. I mean, I think that the more quality coffee is out there, the all the ships rise, including I don't think machinery will ever take the place of a good barista, or just like a robotics will never take the place of a good chef. But that doesn't mean robotics can't be used to produce a better product, because people at different, you're running through an airport, whatever. There are times when it's
Exactly.
appropriate to go and sit in a cafe and have a coffee and have the whole culture of that and the whole experience. And
Yeah.
that will never go away, in my opinion. Just like a great
Oh, I
chef will
agree
never go
too.
away.
I totally
But
agree.
but
I
but
hope it never goes away.
yeah.
I mean, that would be a crime.
But at the
I
same
wouldn't
time,
want that to go away.
yeah, there are times and places where I might go to a machine to get coffee, and if I'm going to do that, let me get a good cup of coffee.
Exactly.
But I think that is something that it's worth a minute or two discussing, because
Sure.
this will be a reaction of a lot of people. Wait a second, you're
Yeah.
telling me that we're going to do away with cafes and specialty coffee shops, and your response to that
Yeah.
would be what?
Well, I want to, as a company, I wanted to create opportunities from the farm all the way
Mm-hmm.
through to the end user. And my response to that is exactly what you're saying, is that there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of time and places that are really underserved by quality coffee. So think of the airport at 6 in the morning, or the
Right.
hospital in the middle of the night. These places, people are used to getting, more and more people are used to, they understand what good coffee tastes like. And once you've got that, sort of the Whole Foods kind of thing.
Right.
Once you've had a really good piece of fruit that has actually really tastes like it should, it's hard to go back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so all these underserved locations, it's really hard to get there. And by applying this technology, and by reducing the waste around everything associated with making that cup, and by leveraging, just from ecological point of view, not creating a new air conditioned space, and not consuming more, but actually consuming less, we can then create opportunities,
Right.
not take opportunities
Right.
away.
Right.
And by the way, every employee, we now have 40 employees. We've done nothing but created jobs, and these are high quality jobs.
Right.
And our lowest level employee is a very experienced techs.
Right.
And so it's been an argument from the Industrial Revolution, before that even. I mean, so the wheel was probably a pretty good idea, and if we had said that we weren't going to do
Right.
that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well. The other thing I would give
Get
an
over that.
example. Yeah, Charles, I would give the example. What I'm thinking of now as you explain this. Let's say somebody's in the military and they're on an army base, and
Yeah.
there's going to be no, like, high end specialty coffee shop there,
Mhm.
but maybe there's a machine, and the person
Yeah.
goes and they drink. They come from they're used to drinking whatever coffee they got at 7-Eleven, and they go in the army, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, hey, I go to this machine now, and I'm getting, it's a much higher quality. So then
Yeah.
they come out of the army, or they leave the base, and they go into a
Yeah.
town, and they no longer want to go to the 7-Eleven. So if they're in
Exactly.
Austin, they're going to
Yeah.
go. You have some great coffee shops like Houndstooth, Fleet, Figure
Yeah.
Eight, Medici,
Yes.
Cafe
I'm going to go
Medici,
there.
and they're going to look for that. So I see what the argument, because I think this
Yeah.
is important, because I've had some of the great baristas of the world on my show, including the Dale
Uh huh.
Harris, the current world barista champion. He actually addresses this issue about technology and how it'll affect coffee, and why the barista will always be important. But I
Yeah.
think it's worth spending a couple of minutes on this, because this was
Yeah.
my reaction when I first heard about robotics and coffee, and
No.
but I think it's something to really think through. That let's improve quality in every area of coffee.
I mean, it's in all our culture statements in the business, but it's around creating opportunities, and you create opportunities by being more efficient about what you do. And
Mm-hmm.
what struck me at the very beginning is coming from Honduras and coming back here and going back and forth, and being just slapped in the face with how wasteful we are here in the West,
Mm-hmm.
how little we appreciate what we're given to work with. If you can use the automation to be less wasteful, and actually treating what we're given more precisely, and getting that into people's hands, that's goodness.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
And
Charles,
so,
you you
yeah.
you uh, you have this idea to start a company. Oh, and you're an engineer, and so then I would imagine next step you start developing the robotics, the technology. do you put a team together, and do you do it yourself? And what are
Yeah.
some of the
So okay.
challenges that you initially faced?
So first, going to a champion barista and understanding, is this problem solvable? And I went to an engineering firm up in Georgetown, Texas, where I could camp out and I could actually pay engineers by the hour to do the mechanical, electrical, and kind of robotics work to go create what was our first generation machine. We call it K1, but what it was a replica of Patrick Pierce, of how he would pull a shot and how he would stretch milk. And that was like big R, little d. It was originally a machine that I only intended to have in the lab to get the fundamental knowledge you need in order to take the next step. It turned out that machine worked so well and we had contacts who became my partner, Kevin Nader, who's now the CEO. After a year of me working this out, then I talked to him and he joined me, and together we started to self-fund this exercise. And eventually we brought in some other investors, people we knew. And then we went to UT with a first prototype in 2011 that was not fully automated, but it automated all the espresso and milk processes. Excuse me, my voice is kind of dropping here because I'm not feeling that well. Excuse me. I'm going to cough. So we actually ended up wrapping that machine into our what we call K1, and you might see images, Google images. If you look at it, you'll see a big boxy machine. That was to prove that at that point we tied it to an app. We needed to prove in 2011 that people would change their behavior and actually order coffee through an app and then get text when it's ready and come down and get it. That was new to a lot of investors, and they didn't actually believe that we could changing people's behaviors in something that's so ingrained as coffee that frankly didn't prove it. And fortunately we had a location at UT, which was really a great location in the old they call it the FAC, it was the undergraduate library. They created essentially like a 6,000 plus square foot coffee shop in the middle of the University of Texas. So we were able to be plowed right in the center of that. And that was a great experiment area for that generation. And while that first generation was running, it wasn't fully automated in terms of cup manipulation, things like that. But while that was running, I started work on the second generation with, again, this team that was up in Georgetown. Now we had more resources so we could get more of their help. And we got some other outside folks to help us with the software. But again, it was all kind of contracted out at that point. But we generated the machine that you see today, that what we call K2, which is the house.
Right.
There was also the whole ID improvement that was done with a world-class designer out of San Francisco that helped us get the branding all together. And there we were proving when that second design was to say, here's a fully automated machine that puts a lid on the cup and is good for those scenarios we talked about, middle of the night in a hospital.
Right. Well, let me ask you a question about the equipment itself. One question is, how fresh are the coffee beans that go into the machine?
No.
And when I order a coffee, have the beans already been ground before that, or are they ground at the time I order the coffee?
No. So we actually import our own beans. We have an expert that's been in the business for decades now. It's been all origin. So we actually import we source our beans. We roast them locally here at Austin Roasting. Every week they're roasted. We monitor that roast. We monitor the beans every season. Like right now, we're going through a new crop, and we're analyzing what will be in the next season. But anyway, every week we get a new roast. So those beans we have a tight window of when we use those roasted beans. You don't want to use them right away. They got to sit for a short period of time.
Right.
And then they go in the machine. The machine, every cup is ground fresh. Every cup in the machine is espresso based. So we are grinding. You order a drink. When the machine starts it actually goes and grinds. But with all through the day, it's adjusting for the shot time targets, and it's adjusting the dose as well as the fineness of the grind. as you go through the day, and to keep it within a tolerance window for the shot time. And so, as a barista would be constantly looking at his shot times, looking at the pull, and deciding whether he has to adjust the coarseness or the dosing. That's all being done. It's all automated, so that the shots are constantly monitored. And if we're outside of the spec, then we throw that drink away and make it again. But everyone is ground fresh.
Wow.
And it's all espresso based.
Now, going into the future, are there any challenges you're still dealing with technologically, or are there other aspects of refinement that you're working on with the equipment?
So this is the third generation machine that we're now rolling out. There's 4 of them in the market here in Austin, and we moved into a much larger location. We're manufacturing them now and starting to roll out to other cities, here in Texas first, and then we'll go to the West Coast. But we're working on, this is a pretty complex machine, and so like any big complex machine, as it's starting to roll out, it'll tell you things, teach you things, and we refine software and the hardware as we're evolving. So we have all the I talked before about outside engineering resources. In the last few years, we brought all of that in-house. Whole is now Briggo employees, all the mechanical, electrical engineering, that's all done in-house. And so we'll continue to evolve that software, both in monitoring and controlling the machine, as well as the software that the end customer uses.
Great.
You can kind of think of that's what's going to go forward, is that.
Where are you located now? Where one might find your machines?
We're in Austin. Well, where are we located? So right now we have 4 locations. One is at Dell Computer, one's at Samsung, one's at 3M, and one is publicly accessible on the drag. It's in a ice cream / cookie shop called Mujo's. So it's right across from UT on Guadalupe. So you can go, anyone in Austin can go and give it a check out there.
Great.
And what we're working on, we actually have a location at the airport, and as soon as we get all the permits and plumbing done, we'll actually be inside security right in the middle of the airport.
Yeah. Well, I want to say that I was in Austin recently. Mostly I was at a wedding, but also visiting all the cafes I could there. It's a great coffee town. It's a great city all round, and certainly I'll look for your machines the next time I'm there. A couple of final questions I want to ask you, and it is, what are your own coffee consumption habits? How much coffee and how do you drink it every day? And do you still enjoy, in addition to getting coffee from your Briggo machines, do you still enjoy going to a cafe once in a while?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so my own habit is, we have a machine, and we have one that we use for our own development inside, and so we all drink our own coffee. So I'm unfortunately, any time of day you come here, I've got a Briggo cup in my hand. I don't necessarily drink them all, but I go everything from just espressos to internally we can make a macchiato and cortados, and sometimes I'll do those cappuccinos. But and then we have real nice iced coffees, so I like that. And every once in a while I'll have our chai. We have an organic chai that I'll drink, but that's a lot. A lot for me. I'm kind of have a drier palate myself. But yeah, I drink that a lot, and yeah, I love to go to shops, and particularly with my sons. My sons are just, they're twins and they're 20, and they love to go to coffee shops. So it's I just want that to be really clear. We love coffee, and we just want to bring it to just be ubiquitous, and there's more coffee shops like that, and that's just because I love that. That's a great separate experience. I don't enjoy sitting in a drive-through. There's no experience there. I mean, there's nothing to going into a shop and just grabbing my thing and leave. I don't have an experience there. That I don't actually do. I'll make my own at home, right? Or that.
Great. Well, I certainly look forward to trying your coffee out, and wish you continued success, and have you back on the show sometime in the future as you continue to refine your work. But it sounds like you've worked out a lot of the kinks, and you've got the coffee flowing. So Wishing you continued success, and thank you so much for taking the time to come on. And
Well,
again,
thank you.
briggo.com. Check it out, and we'll have all that information posted. Thanks a lot, Charles.
Thank you so much.
Right.